The Louisiana Book Festival enjoyed its 6th year in downtown Baton Rouge, representing over 100 authors. Join us for Louisiana Book Talks as we celebrate our rich literary culture with highlights from the 2008 Louisiana Book Festival, featuring author George Singleton. Book lovers of all ages enjoy the variety of activities offered at the Louisiana Book Festival. Between the Capitol Building and the State Library, the festival is packed with booths housing everything from storytellers to basic printmaking skills, and cartoon artists to specialty publishers. In the state capitol, authors read from their latest works, often providing personal insight to their writing. In this edition of Book Talks, we'll listen in on author George Singleton as he offers advice to aspiring writers. Singleton has compiled his short stories in several collections, and they've been published in a number of literary magazines and anthologies. Noted for his quirky satire, Singleton has also authored 2 novels and teaches English and fiction writing at the college level near his home in South Carolina. He reads from his book Pep Talks, Warnings, and Screeds, Indispensable Wisdom and Cautionary Advice for Writers.
When I was 12 years old, for no rational reason, I ran around the block. My father reset his odometer and drove the car along my course to find that I had covered 0.6 of 1 mile. The next day I ran around a 2-block area that ended up being exactly a mile. This went on. Right before I turned 14, my father followed me all over the area of my training as I tried to run the length of a marathon. As it ended up, I did not run 26.2 miles, but I did go 20.6 without stopping. Granted, I had slowed down to something like a 40-minute pace, but what the hell. My father, I should point out, had this theory that if I went out at a dead sprint every day when I ran, over time I'd be able to run a mile on a dead sprint. That didn't work out either. Such a running regimen can be equated to the writing process. If a person writes and reads good work every day, then at the end of the year he has no other option but to have evolved into a better writer. There will be bad writing days. As in running, there are shin splints, tendinitis, pulled muscles, head colds that make breathing difficult. But in the end, after a year of writing, a page or more per day, the writing is stronger. Listen, if I went out and ran as far as I could today, I'm old, I've had some bad habits over the years, etc., I might make it a mile. That would be stretching it, but let's say a mile. And if I wait for a year to run again, then I'll only run a mile again at best. If I write and read today and wait a year to write and read again, I will be no better. No geography. Please don't write a story wherein the protagonist gets in a car in San Francisco and arrives in Portland 2 hours later. Don't mention the mountains of Florida. You'll need to know geography later on too, because your publicist will not know geography. I once had a publicist who, after 3 book tours of my zigzagging around the South, said to me, "I just realized that Jackson, Mississippi is south of Memphis." It explained the New Orleans to Memphis to Jackson to Blytheville, Arkansas to Birmingham to Nashville legs of the tour. I would be willing to bet that if you began playing the lottery daily at the very same time that you started your writing career, you would be a ticket-holding winner before you publish your first novel or collection of stories. I'd be willing to bet that you'd have a winning ticket before you sold a story to a magazine that paid more than a few $100s plus a year's subscription. It might not be the giant winner, but it would be one of those winners where you pick 4 out of the 5 numbers or however it works. If you still want to keep writing, good. Masochist. Being mean, inconsiderate, and inappropriate with your spouse, partner, boyfriend, or girlfriend will get you time in the doghouse. Spending most of your time writing or reading blogs will get you time in the blog house. In a doghouse, you might find fleas. You might find fleas in a blog house too. Remember that fleas are bloodsuckers. If you have a writing teacher of some sort, please do not give him 2 paragraphs of a story and ask, "What do you think?" That would be analogous to saying, "Hey, I'm thinking about baking a cake. Taste these raw eggs and tell me what you think. Later, I'll let you eat a packet of yeast." If you have a group of friends, colleagues, or classmates reading your story drafts, and personally I'm against having too many people read drafts, seeing as friends' opinions don't count as much as an editor's opinions, and all of them say that the beginning sucks but the ending's fine, or vice versa, then take heed. If I bake that cake and give 8 people slices, and all 8 people say, you should have used something called sugar in the cake mix, then I would be an idiot to yell out, no, this is how I made it. This is what came out. This is how it was supposed to be. Don't mess with my creative process. Instead, I should take their advice and bake a better cake next time. You must be stupid to succeed in writing. You must possess a certain amount of masochism and flat-out orneriness. You will receive plenty of rejection letters if indeed you send your work out to real publishers and real agents and real magazines. Anyone can get published online these days. Anyone with a bank account can publish his own great American novel complete with typographical errors because no editor was involved. But to get published for real takes time, patience, commitment, stubbornness, and the brains of a hammer. Would you ask someone out on a date every week for 10 years in a row if that person kept saying no? No. You couldn't take that kind of rejection. It would kill your ego. But if you were meant to be a writer, each rejection that comes in the mail will only strengthen your resolve. You will say to yourself, I will show them. There's nothing wrong with method writing. If you choose to write a character who is an animal rescuer, please volunteer at the Humane Society. If you want to write about someone who works the flea market, then gather up some old knickknacks, rent a table at the flea market, and talk to people on both sides of the aisle. If you have not caught and cleaned and fried up a catfish or perch, please do so before writing a story about someone with a bone caught in her throat. Make up the stories about bank robbers, murderers, litterers, adulterers, survivalists, drunks, heroin addicts, trolls, voodoo practitioners, pickpockets, carjackers, and jellyfish handlers. But first do some research for these options, please. This might not be the best advice for a number of reasons, but it worked for me mostly. Open a checking account. Write a bad check right away. Now you have bad credit. You can forget about it. You don't have to think every minute of every day, I can't write a bad check, I might get bad credit. You have bad credit. You won't be able to buy a riding lawnmower with monthly payments. So what? Who cares? Now your mind is free to think up stories. You'll be able to concentrate better. By the time you make it as a writer, those 7 years will be long gone and you'll have good credit again and you can buy a lawnmower and maybe even a car. Although it will have probably changed 40 times by the time I say this, the latest recommended daily intake of fruits and vegetables set up by either the National Institute of Health or the FDA stands between 5 and 13 half-cup servings. You should eat fish twice a week and at least 3 servings of whole grains per day. That's how things are as I write this. Things change. I remember not all that long ago when we were supposed to be eating a lot of beef. I remember people loading up on liverwurst, ribeyes, and pork chops the night before swimming long distances. Then somebody, again my paranoia tells me it's someone from the Pasta Institute of America, discovered carbo loading. Stories run these kinds of cycles. There will be decades when first-person narrators are all the rage and decades when you can't publish a first-person story in a magazine called I. As a writer, you have a choice. Either figure out what a magazine's intended audience likes and understands and make an effort to please that particular magazine's editor, or stay the course and hope to be discovered long after you're dead. There will come a time when a doctor or lawyer contacts you. He'll say, hey, I know you're a writer, and I've written a 400-page novel that I'd like for you to edit. You'll love it. You must say, and promise me that you'll say this, sure, I've been meaning to call you. Will you show me how to perform knee surgery on myself? Or will you write my will for free? If you're from a small town in any part of the United States, and then you somehow win a 1-week trip to Paris, Munich, Rome, London, Barcelona, Athens, Mexico City, Buenos Aires, Miami, Sydney, Moscow, New Delhi, Los Angeles, Tokyo, Copenhagen, Addis Ababa, Chicago, Nairobi, Johannesburg, Beijing, Caracas, or New York City, please continue to write about people living in a small, small town. Trust me when I say that the bizarre characters and conflicts that occur in, say, Hohenwauer, Tennessee, are far more interesting than a family of bakers swatting flies in Versailles. Please do not go around saying I'm going to write the great American novel when I retire. That's as preposterous as saying I'm going to take up philanthropy and receive the Nobel Peace Prize when I retire, or I'm going to take up painting and have a one-person show at the Museum of Modern Art when I retire, or I'm going to buy a bicycle and win the Tour de France when I retire. Writing, like giving, painting, and biking, is a lifelong process that takes daily practice. On occasion, I walk into one of the coffee houses near where I work. There's a Starbucks nearby, of course, but then there are others that may or may not be part of a chain. Port City Java, Coffee Underground, Coffee Beanery, Joel's Java, You're the One, Jitters, Shakey's, The Burra's Back, Postcards from Tijuana. There are sharecroppers working larger land tracts in the south than the square quarter mile where these roasting businesses seem to thrive. Usually I have to wade in, look at the glaze-eyed teenager working the counter and say, just give me a regular, house blend, a regular coffee. Close as you can get to Folgers or Maxwell House or U-Bahn or chock full of nuts. In the past, the counter people usually cocked their heads to one side, and for a while I thought they had never heard of these brands. Maybe they thought, what kind of coffee doesn't have the word forest, pampas, or biodiversity in its title? Then I realized that they couldn't hear me. All the noise, not only the mournful, suicide-inducing music playing overhead, but the constant tapping of fingers on keyboards. This has to stop immediately. Let me say now that I have never walked into, say, the Daily Grind and found athletes scattered around the tables performing squat thrusts, doing crunches and push-ups, or counting out sets of curls. Nor have I seen seamstresses roll out bolts of cloth, cut out patterns, then whip out their sewing machines. I've not seen veterinarians haul in their sick canines, pull them out of portable pet carriers, and administer rabies and parvo vaccinations. There have been exactly 0 potters working their wheels, taxidermists stuffing their bobcats, toxicologists using petri dishes to play checkers, circus performers practicing their knife throwing, pilots working some kind of virtual reality takeoff and landing apparatus, or exotic dancers using the sugar and cream kiosk as some kind of bar. One time I saw a general practitioner trying to drum up free breast exams, but he got kicked out. So what's with all of the writers thinking that their craft is some kind of spectator sport? When did novelists, essayists, and poets, especially poets, come to the belief that everyone would be mesmerized, enchanted, and enthralled with having to look at their tortured selves staring blankly at the ceiling tiles before typing out something like, her collection of Mardi Gras beads, like string coffee beans, remind me of the last time I saw her when she slapped me in the face and said, get lost, loser. I don't get it. Knife throwers would be a different story, but not writers. Now, someone with a bigger heart and more patience might argue they're beginning writers, George. They can't afford the electricity to run their brand new laptops. Fine and dandy. I don't notice them ordering regular house blend coffees the likes of 8 o'clock, which costs on average $1.87 for a grande, venti, enorme, gordo, whatever it's called. No, they're getting the things with chocolate syrup and whipped cream and sprinkles, which cost upwards of $6. I'm no mathematician, but 6 times 30 comes to $180. No one pays $180 a month to provide electricity to a hovel where beginning poets should live, by the way. They need to view the outside world for ideas, George. Writers, young and old, need to experience life around them. This argument makes some sense. Great. I've already pointed out there are no veterinarians, seamstresses, taxidermists, toxicologists, exotic dancers, or knife throwers inside these places. So what's to write about? People ordering cups of coffee? Other miserable poets? If these coffeehouse denizens want to see the world and write about it, then they should pack up their laptops and moleskins, jump a freight train to somewhere like North Dakota or Patagonia, and drink campfire coffee with hobos and gauchos. I ask that everyone out there who walks into a coffee shop see someone wearing an ascot, smoking an imaginary pipe, fiddling with 18 metal rings stapled into his or her face, and straining to come up with a synonym for desperate, please go up to said writer and say, "What do you think about Faulkner? How's about the good old agrarian poets? Hey, let's you and me recite some of James Dickey's poems together." If you are lucky, the beanhead will ask, "Who are these magical writers of which you mention?" Then you can mention how these writers all had small rooms off at the far end of their houses with maybe some framed pictures of their dogs, dead dogs, and spouses on their desks near their typewriters. There were half-filled bottles more than likely, and empty ones that brought luck at one time or another. There were ashtrays, knives, smooth stones, found pennies, and bones of one sort or another there, too. Fishing lures, a list of editors who've either shown interest or wrongly misread the writer, some voodoo dolls, packs of matches, folk art, a dictionary. This is how a writer's workplace should appear. Never shall the words sprinkles or whipped cream show up. If the would-be writer looks befuddled, then you can point out the nearest public library, a place where more writers should hang out if indeed they don't own a desk. This is called How to Write Stories, Lose Weight, Clean Up the Environment, and Make $1 million. This plan will work if and only if the writer is, say, 25 years old and intends to live another 50 years. But it's fun to play, even if you start at age 30 or 40. Maybe it'll give you the incentive to live past 90. Day 1. Wake up early and sit in front of the computer or open up a nice Mead composition notebook. It doesn't matter. I will assume that you know what a short story is, basically a 5,000-word piece of fiction with a recognizable beginning, middle, and end that involves a protagonist trying to best an antagonist. There will be rising action, conflict, dialogue, and maybe even a beautiful lyrical passage shoved somewhere in the middle when you weren't quite sure where the story was headed. On the first day, put 2 characters in an uncomfortable situation. Maybe you're writing about the time you were 16 years old and buying condoms and your boyfriend or girlfriend's mother walked up behind you. That's pretty awkward if you ask me. This is fiction though, so you need to make up some crap. Make the mother limp too, for instance. Have her holding a package of bunion pads. Anyway, write 1,000 words on the first day. Now go out. This will work if and only if you live out in the country in a state that doesn't offer a nickel for cans, seeing as no one in those states throws nickels out their open car truck window, I doubt, like they do where I live in Dacusville, South Carolina. Take a plastic bag and pick up at least 50 aluminum cans. This might take as much as a quarter mile of walking. Come back home, place the cans upright, stomp on them. This will reduce space. Throw the cans in some kind of container with a top, a rubber garbage can, for instance. If you live in an apartment complex, make sure that your neighbors don't snoop around and steal your cans. Wait, you live in the country. You live in a place like Dacusville, South Carolina. Maybe I should have mentioned that you might be living in a trailer. Anyway, put up the cans. Start thinking about tomorrow. Day 2. Reread your first 1,000 words. Rewrite. If you chose to write in a notebook, type up the rewrite on a computer. I'm not going to mention this again. Make sure your characters' names didn't change somewhere in the middle. Pick right up where you left off and add another 1,000 words. Then go out and gather another 50 cans, which might take you as much as a half mile of walking. Stomp. Add to the first batch. Day 3. Reread your first 2,000 words. Rewrite. Write another 1,000. Go out on that walk and retrieve 50 cans, which might now take 3/4 of a mile. Don't forget to wash your hands when you get home. I should have mentioned that earlier too. Stomp and add to the first 2 days' batch. Day 4. Reread your first 3,000 words. Rewrite. Write another 1,000. Go walk a mile and pick up 50 cans. Stomp them when you get home. Make a note to change the antagonist's name because you don't want to get sued later on in life by people who don't have the tenacity to become famous, rich, skinny, and environmentally conscious in the old-fashioned, difficult way. Add your cans into the bin and realize that you've picked up 200 aluminum cans already. Good job. You're doing your part. If you want to celebrate, make sure to drink beer out of a can so you can add it to your collection. Day 5, reread your 4,000 words. Rewrite. Write another 1,000. Finish up that first draft of your story. You've probably been thinking up possible titles while taking your aluminum can gathering walk, so make a decision. First off, ditch the first 2 or 3 titles that came to your mind. One of them will probably be something like The Lesson. It has been used. One of them might be Good Country People, seeing as you're happy about good country people throwing out their empty PBR cans. You can't use that title either. So settle on something like The Captain of the Solitaire Team, because you've been thinking about how all these homeschool kids living in the area don't have sports teams or after-school activities. Okay, now go out, walk a good 1.25 miles down the 2-lane road and get your 50 cans. Bring them home, stomp on them, and add them to the rest. Day 6, reread the finished story, make some changes, print out a few copies, go out and get another 50 cans, which might take you 1.5 miles of walking. When you get home, stand on the scale and notice that all this walking has caused you to lose almost 4 ounces of weight. Maybe you shouldn't have been eating all those Little Debbie oatmeal cream pies while you wrote. Now gather your cans and take them down to a place that buys scrap metal. Turn in the cans. On average, 25 cans weighs about 1 pound. You'll turn in 10 pounds of aluminum, which will come to about $5 on today's market. Use that money to buy stamps. Buy 6 first-class mail stamps and as many subsequent ounce stamps as possible. I realize that postal rates will go up in the future, but then again, maybe the price of recyclable aluminum will skyrocket. Always be optimistic like I am. A 5,000-word short story usually runs about 18 pages. Every 4 pages of typing paper weighs 1 ounce. Your story plus the cover letter, which will only read, "Dear editors, please consider the enclosed story Captain of the Solitaire Team for an upcoming issue," will cost less than $1.50 to mail. And you'll need a regular business-size SASE enclosed for response, so that's, say, $1.91 tops. You'll almost be able to send your story out to 3 places, which, for some reason, is frowned upon by some editors, but what the hell, you wouldn't apply for 1 job at a time, would you? And the editors are way up in New York more than likely, and so won't send down their unpaid interns to rough you up, because the unpaid interns would stay for good once they notice how you live in one of the cleanest square miles in America. $1.91 times 3 comes to $5.73. Maybe you should have picked up more than 50 cans a day. I should have mentioned that it's easy to find empty aluminum cans in the garbage cans at convenience stores, gas stations, in most parking lots, and so on. Maybe you understood that already. I hope so. I'm hopeful that you got obsessed about picking up aluminum, that you have enough for extra stamps. I know it happened to me. When people ask me, rudely I think, about my retirement plans, I say that I have all my money wrapped up in the aluminum market. Now send that story to the New Yorker, Harper's, the Atlantic Monthly, Playboy, Esquire, or any of those slick magazines that pay upwards of $3,000 a story. The chances of 2 of those magazines wanting the same story are slim. Don't sweat over it. If you do sweat over it, just think of it as another way to lose weight. Day 7, start over. Start a new story. Write 1,000 words. Go out and pick up cans and notice how you're now walking farther or further. Make a note to get out the dictionary and look up the difference between those 2 words when you get home, stomp, and wash your hands. Do the same for lay and lie, so you no longer have to write sentences like, "I reclined on the couch," or "You're telling a big fat untruth." Day 8, don't be discouraged by the rejection from the Atlantic Monthly. It'll appear that the fiction editor rented a Learjet to give you the bad news. How did the post office get the manuscript to him and he get the answer back so quickly, you'll wonder. He's that fast. Rewrite the first 1,000 words of the second story, write another 1,000, and realize that you need to get the first story back out in the mail soon. You might have to jack up the number of cans per day, so you'll need more postage. End of year 2. You finally hear about that first story you sent off from those magazines that weren't the Atlantic Monthly. Because you sent a story a week to them, you think, man, they're still holding 103 stories of mine. Meanwhile, you've taken each story and sent it off to literary journals that pay $50 a page, or 25 or 10. You've started sending to places that'll offer you contributors' copies, but that's all right. You're up to walking anywhere from 6 to 10 miles a day in order to find cans. You've lost 20 pounds or more. Year 8. The Atlantic Monthly takes a story, or Harper's. No matter what or where, you get $3,000 to $5,000 upon signing the contract. Do not go out on a 15-year drinking binge. Promise me you will not go on a 15-year drinking binge. Not that I did. It's like 30. Take the money and invest it in either a CD getting 5% interest. I don't know where you're going to find that. I wrote this a year ago. Or in a mutual fund that is not Putnam Voyager B. Years 9 through 15. You've sold stories now to a few of the slick magazines. You've told a number of agents that you were thinking about writing a novel. You've been anthologized and you've been in a number of literary magazines. You still live in a trailer, but the countryside is spectacular. You've invested all that money and now can boast about being a $25,000 heir. Years 16 through 19. Surely someone will take a chance on publishing your first collection of stories. You've now written about 832 of the things, 10 of which are okay. You look good, except for all those nasty sores and lesions on your hands from forgetting to properly wash them after getting cut by aluminum cans. Year 20. Sign the book deal no matter what. Like the rest of your money, stash 90% of the Picayune advance. Hey, I got to say Picayune in Louisiana. How about that? I got a pack of Picayune cigarettes on my desk. They're my grandfather's. I might smoke one day just for the heck of it. I bet they're not very fresh. Sign the book deal no matter what. Like the rest of your money, stash 90% of the Picayune advance into a CD or mutual fund that's not Putnam Voyager B. Take what's left over to wash and wax your trailer. After 20 years. You'll never understand the workings of interest rates, but over time, notice how you don't have kids with which to bother or a spouse, since you've been slightly focused on your work. Your savings will grow and grow and grow. You'll get more book deals and a chance to leave the trailer in order to speak to people at colleges. They'll pay you more money than the magazine somehow, and you'll speak at writers' conferences even though you never attended one over all those years. You never attended a writers' conference because 1, they cost way too much money, and 2, you rightly wrote over that time instead of talked about writing. Caveats. This little outline, of course, must be adjusted if you have a full-time job on the side. Maybe you have medical problems that need to be looked into. Maybe you live in a dry county where there's not enough discarded beer cans. Maybe you live in a county with a high rate of diabetes and there aren't Coke or Pepsi products laying or lying around. Maybe it's difficult to write a story a week. 1 every month is fine, but you'll have to multiply all those years up above by 4. Maybe the trailer gets hit by a tornado and you lose the will to live. Maybe you went on that 15-year binge, like I've heard most writers do. Maybe you fell in love with someone coming from the other direction, picking up cans off the side of the road, and now there's a bad, jealous rivalry going on between 2 writers. Well, then, don't write.
Louisiana Book Talks is produced in cooperation with the Center for the Book in the State Library of Louisiana, and made possible in part by a grant from the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities. This program is a production of Louisiana Public Broadcasting.